My name's Amahla, and this is The Hardest Part.
Hello, and welcome to The Hardest Part, the show that unravels the stories behind the most challenging songs ever written. I'm Kieron Banerji, and joining me in the studio on this episode is Amahla. When I spoke with her about her song Apathy, she shared the deep and personal journey behind its creation. The track delves into the vices we turn to when life becomes overwhelming. Those moments when stress, anxiety, and the pressures of the world push us to seek solace in tuning out. But with that escape comes a lingering sense of guilt. Apathy is a reflection of those feelings, capturing the delicate balance between detachment and the sensitivity that lies beneath. Amahla wrote the song over the course of a few weeks. At the time, she was immersed in folk and gospel music, genres that deeply influenced the song's mood and tone. She was captivated by the vulnerability and sensitivity that both styles convey, and apathy became an unintended consequence of that influence. The song mirrors the emotional overwhelm she was experiencing and the detachment that came from choosing to tune out from friendships, relationships, and even the news. It's a powerful reflection of the struggles we all face when trying to navigate the complexities of life and the internal conflicts that arise when we retreat into ourselves. Make sure to stay tuned to hear Apathy in full at the end of this episode, but before that, here's my chat with Amahla.
So this song is called Apathy. It must have taken me months to write. And I think that was because I didn't really know what I was doing. I just picked up my guitar and I said, I'm listening to gospel, I'm listening to folk, I'm listening to a little bit of like R&B and country music, like where's my voice? So I think it was the hardest because it was like the first. And since then I've been able to grow and find myself and find my sound a little bit more. But yeah, it was definitely a beginning.
Maybe we could touch on a little bit about what the song's about. The lyrics make it quite obvious is that it's about vices. I'd love to know a little bit about sort of where the song began.
I wrote it in 2019. And 2019 was an interesting year because it was the year I started my career properly as a musician. I was coming in, I was playing shows. And as a songwriter, I think I was looking at what was happening in the world and going, how can I speak about it? How can I share my thoughts and opinions on life in my art? And I think this was one of the first songs where I was able to kind of capture the sort of disillusionment that I felt. I think politically, I can't remember who the Prime Minister was. We've had so many.
Especially that period of time.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, it changed, didn't it?
I think it might have been Theresa May.
It must have been, I think if it was just before COVID, it must have been Theresa May.
I think so.
But they switched and changed a lot then.
We've had a lot of leaders.
Yeah, there'll be a history and politics exam somewhere in the future that studies that period of time, for sure.
So the government, of course, was awful. We were kind of getting sort of in the midst of like the refugee crisis, and on the news all the time there were like lots of people coming over and drowning in the Mediterranean, and the Mediterranean countries kicking them out, and there was a lot of racism and a lot of violence in terms of the greater context. And for me personally, I'd lost quite a few people who were dear to me, that were big parts of my life that year and the year before. And I think I felt this like huge sense of like overwhelm, both of like personal responsibility, what can I do for myself, but like what can I do for the world?
Right.
And I quickly realized that it is actually very easy to tap out, to, switch the news off and go and play guitar and be try and be a pop star and not have to engage with these issues. So I wanted to touch on that kind of guilt that you feel when you decide I actually can't take everything that is occurring at this moment, and I have to find some peace in my mind. But yeah, because it's not straightforward and it's not easy. You have to sit in that privilege, I think, a bit.
Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to someone about this the other day, actually, and sometimes the kindest thing not only you can do for yourself, but to others is be slightly, I guess, selfish would be like the word to use, but sometimes to take that time of reflection when you can regroup, and then when you come back from that sort of period of reflection, you have so much more to give the world, right? You can make so much more impact because you've truly understood the issues that you want to sort of help solve with your mission, really.
Definitely. And I had no idea. I mean, this came out in, I think, November 2019, and I had no idea how my life would change like 6 months after that. And just in terms of context for me, the following year I spent quite a lot of it volunteering and like supporting people who had lost their entire incomes because of COVID and like working to help them eat, pretty much, like organizing people, delivering food, delivering medication, like, and that is very much me, and that was me at that time, but I didn't have the context or the environment to sort of muster that urgency. So yeah, it's an interesting song that comes at an interesting time.
I'd love to sort of double click on some of the influences. You know, we were chatting before the show about some of the influences you had, but before then, I'd love to really like sort of deep dive into the actual lyrics. Where did this song really begin?
It started as it goes on, to be honest. It started with the first verse: dark sheets, cigarettes and beer, hold me like I'm really here, insecure love affair. Dark sheets, cigarettes and beer, hold me like I'm really here, insecure love affair. Watching TV, looking for a mirror highlight. This is how it feels. I begin dosing up, puts my mind at ease. Muted cries, scream please. One too many, and I love to reveal that ignorance is bliss, and I love it here, singing there will be no encore. A state of mind unmatched under the spell of apathy. And it's just about finding distraction in things that aren't particularly good for you. And I remember when I came up with those lines and the imagery that it kind of evoked in my head, it was dark, but it was also like warm. So if I had to pick like a color, it would be like a sort of forest green, you know, like it's a little dark, but it's not scary.
Yeah.
You can sit in it. From there, it grew pretty much. And I think whenever I sit down to write songs, I'm always thinking about more than one person singing it at the same time. So I feel like my music is very much like is communal. It's not just about my experience or me. It's like, if there are people in my life, if there are people that I meet, if there are fans, can they also sing these lyrics with me? And can we feel like sit in that power together? So I feel like once I got to writing the chorus or refrain, I very much like visualize it with thousands of people singing at the same time. That's why I kind of think I kept the kind of speaking tone. I don't really sing too much in this song in comparison to my others. It's very much like I'm talking.
It's conversation.
It's conversational.
Let's look at some of the inspiration behind the songs, because you know, we were speaking before the show about Nick Drake and Lauryn Hill. What did you take from those artists?
I think there is a sincerity in music, especially the music that comes from the sort of 60s and 70s. I think there is a drive and an intention from the songwriters that we don't feel as much today. They're sharing their words with us like poetry because they have to. There is nothing else they could imagine themselves doing. When you listen to Nick Drake or Joni Mitchell or anybody of that time, or Bob Dylan, it's a compulsion.
Yeah.
And it's something so incredible when they're just sitting with their guitar and their instrument and they're telling a story. And I feel the same way when I pick up a guitar and I start playing some chords. I'm like, okay, what do I have to say? So I think from listening to those artists, I really found my voice, because I realized that actually I'm a storyteller.
Yeah.
You know, that's what I do, whatever genre it is, however it comes out, that's the feeling and intention that I want to put into my art. And I think from Lauryn Hill's live album, I think the song I mentioned was I Got a Fine Peace of Mind.
Yes.
It's a stream of consciousness in the same way that those artists in the 60s and 70s had. You know, there are no drums, there's no distractions, there's no outfit changes. It's very much, this is what I have to say, and I'm going to speak to you as if we are on the same level and we're in the same room. So I think that's how, I was listening to all of those influences, and I think Apathy is what came from that, you know, finding my voice amongst all of those other like great songwriters.
Were there any parts of the song that were particularly hard to finalize? You know, any creative blocks, and how did you overcome them? Yes.
So the version that I played today, I've just put a sort of, like I riff, I do a lot of sort of small vocal acrobatics in the middle 8 section, but on the record it's strings, it's cello and violin, and that took me that section I think took me like 2 months to work out.
Oh, wow.
Because I had the song and I was like, okay, well, what happens now? You know, we've gone verse, pre-chorus, chorus. We've done that twice.
Yeah.
Where do we go? What happens? And I wanted it to feel wonky.
Okay.
You know, the chord change. I didn't want it to feel resolved. I wanted it to feel unsettled and interesting. And originally it was just me doing about 200 harmonies in the back, and then I went, no, actually, like, we need strings. We need to build this song in the same way that, you know, Nick Drake does in Riverman. It's like there's a whole different level of emotion that comes into the music once you add instruments that kind of replicate the voice in different ways. So I got my friend who was playing keys for me at the time, his name's Josh Wilde, and he wrote the string part. And he sent it to me and I was like, yep, that's great.
Perfect.
That's perfect. Let's do that. And then I went into the studio, I recorded about 300 harmonies in the background for the atmosphere. At that point, it was about, you know, how do you sort of like knock somebody out musically, you know?
Yeah.
I always go into the studio, I'm like, I want somebody to listen to it and say, wow. You know, I don't want it to be a vibe.
Yeah.
I really want it to feel incredible. And I think after all of those elements came together, it really brought it to life. And I guess to reflect on your point about, you know, overcoming, I played this song live a lot before I recorded it. I played it at so many open mics. I played it at Sofa Sound events. And I was able to see the reaction from the audience members. I was like, okay, they're losing interest a bit here. Maybe I need to change this. You know, in the middle 8 section, how are people responding to me when it's just me? You know, and I think both that collaboration with your audience and then that collaboration with like your musical peers really does make for something really special when you take note of it.
So our audience are about to hear the beautiful stripped back version of this track that you played for us a moment ago. One thing I love speaking to artists about is And the example I always give is there's a band I really, really love. They brought out a record. I listened to the record. I listened to one specific song that everyone was like, it's the best song on the record. I thought it was really, really, really average. And then I heard the lead singer talking about the true meaning behind the song and these very specific lyrics to pick up on. And it is now my favorite of their songs. It completely changed the way I perceive it. So as our audience are about to listen to the track, is there anything you want them to really listen closely to that's going to change the way that they experience this track?
I've always understood music in relation to its context. When I was growing up, I discovered Nina Simone and I discovered, Etta James, and I realized, they're talking about this moment in time and this historical event. And that's how music ties to history and ties to art and ties to politics. And I think the same is true with my music too. So if we're listening to Apathy in a point right before the world really does begin to change, I would say sit in a dark room, close your eyes, completely give yourself to this moment and just reflect on all of the things that you've experienced in that day, what you found overwhelming, what you found empowering, what held you, and then listen.
Amahla, thank you so much for joining the Hardest Part podcast.
Thank you, Kieron, for having me. Dark sheets, cigarettes and beer hold me like I'm ready here. Insecure, love affair. Watching TV, looking for a mirror highlight. This is how it feels. I begin dosing up. Puts my mind at ease. Muted cries. Scream please. One too many, and I love to reveal that ignorance is bliss. And I love it here. Singing, there will be no encore. A state of mind unmatched under the spell of apathy. Dark sheets, cigarettes and beer hold me like you want me here. Insecure, love affair. Living vessels for the matinee, precious, never far away. All that I really care for is dosing up. Puts my mind at ease. Muted cries, scream please. Oh, one too many, and I love to reveal that ignorance is bliss. And I love it here. Singing, there will be no encore. A state of mind unmatched under the spell of apathy. Apathy. state of mind unmatched, under the spell of apathy. Oh, yes.
Thanks to Amahla for coming on the show. Make sure to subscribe and follow The Hardest Part wherever you get your podcasts. We're on all major streaming platforms, that's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and of course YouTube. This episode of The Hardest Part was recorded at the Thin White Duke Studios in London's Soho. It was recorded by Max Walker and it's mixed and produced by myself. Photos from today's session are by Callum Baker. Additional videography is by Giovanni Almonte. Thanks for tuning in.